Oh man, we are back. I hope everyone's doing well. I am taking a little bit of a break right now from Regulation G, and I wanted to speak about something that I've always found kind of interesting with regards to the game of Pokemon. So one of the things that I've always found super fascinating about like just the game in general is the history of it. Like, how did we end up to the point that we are at now? What happened in like prior formats? Because one of the things that ends up happening is like as the game increases in popularity and more people join, there are people that just don't know what happened in like prior formats because they didn't play it, and like that's totally understandable. Like I started playing back in 2015, but if you ask me about formats beforehand, then my knowledge gets a little bit hazy. Like I know a little bit about 2014, a little bit about 2013, 2012, but if you ask me to like talk about stuff from 2011 or 2010, I know like some bits and pieces of information, but not a whole lot. So one of the things that I always have just found like amazing about the game is just like seeing other metas and then how they developed and prior teams that have won world championships. But we're not actually going to be speaking about the teams that have won the world championships today. So we're going to be talking about teams from prior years that have done like extremely well and could have very well won the world championship that year, but didn't. With that being said, I just want to make note of the fact that I think every person that has won a world championship up to this point in time has been very deserving of winning, and they 100% should have won the year that they won because they were simply the best player and they had a really good team going into those formats and into those tournaments. But I also do feel that there are times where not necessarily the best team may win worlds, and there's a team in the tournament that is really well constructed and well made that, you know, didn't win, and it happens sometimes. So we're going to be speaking about the year 2017. So for those of you that aren't aware, VGC 2017 was my favorite format of all time. It was super fun because there was just a lot of creativity that was involved in the format. There was many different standard teams, and then there was also these very quirky teams that went along with it, which I just found super interesting. And there was always like just new like ideas and strategies that were tried out like basically once a week. And that's not even an exaggeration. I remember there were teams that did super well on ladder that had like Water Spout Werelord on it with Pikachu. And then there was like another wild team that had like not Slowpoke. What's the pre-evolution, I think? Wait, is it? Yeah, it's Slowpoke. Okay, I was kind of forgetting for a sec. Where it was like Eviolite Slowpoke next to Torkoal, and then the Slowpoke would click, I think, either Surf or Bulldoze, whatever move it learned, activate the weakness policy on Torkoal after like it set up Trick Room, and then Torkoal would just click Eruption. So this was a really interesting format, and I just thought it was super awesome to play. But looking back at this World Championship that happened in 2017, the winner was Ryota Itsubo. He had a really well-constructed team with like the Crocodile. He had both Tapus in Koko and then Finny. He had Marowak, which offered like nice support next to Celesteela because of the Lightning Rod and so on and so forth. But I personally feel that during this World Championship that even though Ryota played out of his mind, he did an excellent job and he was 100% deserving of winning Worlds that year. I actually don't think he had the best team going into the tournament. The person who I thought actually had the best team was this guy right here, Tomoyuki Yoshimura. Some of you might be sitting here recognizing his name. I'm going to show you just in a quick sec. He actually won one of the first like Victory Road tournaments, like not offline, one of like the first Victory Road tournaments for Regulation G with the Zamazenta team, and then he actually kind of shaped and molded the way that Zamazenta teams are constructed now, because a lot of Zamazenta teams have like Zama, Chen, Chi-Yu, Amoonguss, Flutter, and then like this Rillaboom slot switches a lot. Sometimes you get like Tornadus, sometimes you get like Urshifu, and so on and so forth. But Tomoyuki's a very well-established player. He's one of the best players ever to have never win a world championship. So my recommendation is keep an eye on him in like the coming years, because he probably will eventually win one. I'm just going to put that out there. But Tomoyuki, I felt this year actually had the best team going into the World Championship because of not only like the interesting picks that he made, but just the way that it countered the meta at the time. So let's start off with just first the Nihilego. So the Nihilego that he was running was actually a super interesting set. It was a bold, bulky Wikiberry set, which just, I want to point out, that was not very common in this format. Like the most common Nihilego sets you would see were kind of like offensive. They would have like Sludge Bomb, Power Gem, Protect, and then some sort of like coverage move in the last slot or whatever. Sometimes they carried like Z Crystals, and so on and so forth. A lot of the time, though, when I played against Nihilego, it was like Focus Sash because it is a poison rock type, so it is quad weak to ground type Pokemon, and Garchomp and Mudstone are very common in this format, but Tomoyuki actually approached Nihilego in a very different way, where it was a Trick Room variant. Up to this point, going into the World Championship, like, no one really saw Trick Room Nihilego other than, like, here and there, but it didn't really gain traction or popularity because the premier Trick Room users in the format were Porygon 2 and Mimikyu, and, like, occasionally Oranguru on, like, those hard Trick Room teams next to Torkoal. But yeah, it was super interesting the way that Tomoyuki constructed this Nihilego, because he almost, like, maxed out on its bulk and then just, like, gave it Sludge Bomb and Power Gem, and then it was meant to kind of, like, support other options on the team, like the Metagross and like the Buzzwole, which were a little bit slower options. But yeah, so it was a super interesting pick, but the reason why he also picked it was because with these coverage moves, you actually could beat a lot of things in the meta. Like with Sludge Bomb, you hit all the Tapus for super effective damage, and Tapu Fini, Lele, Koko, and Bulu were all very popular in this format. And then with Power Gem, it's just like a nice neutral rock move into a lot of into like just a lot of different Pokemon, and also could hit certain things for super effective damage like Arcanine, Alolan Marowak, and so on and so forth. His Tapu Koko, this is like more of a kind of like a standard Tapu Koko set. It was just Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Dazzling Gleam, Protect, Timid with Electrium Z. So like his Koko's not really like that different than the Kokos we saw in this format. Like we saw like Choice Specs variants and Life Orb and just Z crystals. Occasionally, like you'll see an Assault Vest variant on like more bulky Koko. But this pairing of Nihilego and Koko was actually really brilliant just because it did help out a lot against the Lilycole matchups. Keep in mind, Hisui and Lilligant didn't exist at this point in time. It wasn't even a thought yet. So regular form Lilligant was used very commonly next to Torkoal with After You. But with having Koko on the field, now you have the electric terrain up, allowing for Koko and Nihilego to not be put to sleep, and Nihilego actually has really good special defense, so a Leaf Storm wouldn't be able to kill it, so you could just Power Gem into Torkoal and then do a lot of damage, and then with Koko, you could just like click a Dazzling Gleam or just Protect or whatever. So this was a really, really smart pairing, I felt. But obviously, one of the things that does stand out is that these two are both weak to Ground-type moves, so what Tomoyuki did is he actually went with Salamence on the team. Keep in mind the ground types that were used in this format, as I mentioned before, were Mudsdale and Garchomp. And then with Salamence, not only can you intimidate them, because keep in mind, Clear Amulet didn't exist as an item at this time. You guys are probably going to be hearing that common reoccurring theme, like, oh, keep in mind this didn't exist. But yeah, Salamence, it was a really, really nice pick because you can intimidate both of them, lower their attack, and it also was just immune to ground moves, which is awesome. Also, Salamence in this format, like, up to this point, it was seen here and there, but it wasn't, like, super popular. The premier Dragon-type user was Garchomp, but I remember, like, when I was playing this format, I always thought Salamence was super underrated, but the way that people ran it, it was kind of like they would run, like, Z-Crystals and, like, Life Orb and stuff, but Tomoyuki took a totally different approach where he made his Salamence Assault Vest. This probably helped with, like, switch-ins against stuff like Torkoal, but also just it adds a nice general bulk to the team. And the Assault Vest is just, like, it's one of the best items in the game, so finding a spot to put on the team is really, really useful, and I think he just saw that Salamence had a lot of potential, because Salamence does have a lot of nice natural bulk, plus added with the Intimidate, it's really good on the physical side, so this just really helped beefed up its special defenses. But this Salamence, it was a very interesting moveset because it was mixed with Modest. Usually, like, on Salamence in later formats, specifically, like, 2019, you would see Salamence run, like, either a minus special defense or minus defense nature, and then run like mix, but he actually just full-on went Modest, and the reason being is that even though he has the physical moves in Bulldoze and Dragon Tail here, he wanted to actually kind of, like, not make Bulldoze hit his own Metagross for as much damage, because this was a weakness policy Metagross. So this idea of Salamence and Metagross, it actually originated and stemmed from Sajin Park's Goodra Metagross core team that he was running, like, earlier on in the format, where he would use Bulldoze with Goodra into Metagross and then activate a weakness policy with Metagross, but Tomoyuki adapted it to have Salamence, because not only is Salamence just a better overall Dragon type than Goodra, but also, again, with Goodra and Metagross on the same team, it didn't really have great resistances to Garchomp, but now, when you add Salamence to the mix, again, there is a ground immunity. So Tomoyuki would, a lot of the time, would just click, like, Bulldoze into his own Metagross, activate the weakness policy, so now the Metagross hits like a truck, and he'll also lower the speed of opposing Pokemon, but his Metagross, since it had Clear Body It didn't get its speed lower, which was like a huge deal. So this was like a really nice adaptation that he made, and he just made the core overall better. Draco Meteor obviously was just because it was a very strong dragon move. Flamethrower was most likely for stuff like Kartana in this format because that was a really popular steel type, and also probably for Celesteela as well because that was also another really popular steel type. And Dragon Tail was just to force switches out. For those of you that don't know how Dragon Tail works, is that, like I mentioned before, it does force a switch out, but there was a strategy in this format where people would use a move called Extreme Evo Boost. So Eevee got its own Z Crystal, and then what it would do is that it would like use the Z Crystal, it would get like this Omni boost, almost like how you see like Dondozo nowadays, and then it would use the move Baton Pass, and then switch out with a partner in the back, most likely Crocodile, and then use Power Trip with it. But with Salamence, since you could use Dragon Tail, you could actually force a switch out, and then they lose all the boosts, just completely shutting down any Evo Boost teams or any kind of gimmicky strategies like that. So that was really smart to have that as like the last move slot. Usually when I ran Salamence in this format, I kind of ran, I think it was Hydro Pump as the last move. But yeah, this was a really cool pick and really nice utility added to the team. The Metagross I already kind of went over. It's just meant to kind of get its weakness policy activated by Salamence, but even without the weakness policy activation, Metagross still does very nice damage, and it's just always been like a generally good steel type. This was kind of the... I would say like this was the... Well, actually not really this. There was like a few formats beforehand where other steel types were just more prominent than it. Like back in 2015, Metagross was used less often than like Aegislash and Heatran, unless it was like a Mega Metagross set. But in this format, with it just being a generally lower power level, it allowed Metagross to shine here. But I still wouldn't argue that it was the best steel type in this format just because, you know, you had stuff like Kartana and Celesteela, but this was a really nice pick for the team. And also adding it to the team, it just allowed, like, again, with like the Bulldoze and weakness policy strategy to be very potent. And it did complete the Fairy, Steel, and Dragon Core, which is the Dream Core, and probably the best like combination of three types in the game. Going on to this slot, this was Buzzwole. Buzzwole in this format, it was very underexplored, I felt. It was kind of competing with another bug fighting type with Pheromosa, and Pheromosa was just way faster than it, and it could be used as like a mixed attacker, but Buzzwole was just generally just used as kind of like a physical attacker because of its high attack stat, and it had good physical bulk, but it had very poor special bulk. So people kind of just like shied away from it because since it had like mediocre speed, it was tough to use it because with it just having like the mediocre speed, it could kind of get blown up by like flamethrowers and moves such as that. But Tomyuki, he again was able to kind of support the Buzzwole by using just like not only Bulldoze with Salamence to make it like faster than his opponents, but also he had the Trick Room on Nihilego, taking advantage of it. And with the Fighty MZ, it did a lot of damage. Like I remember watching a match where he took up a KO that was very surprising to me. I don't remember what it was in this specific moment, but it just did a lot of general damage. It was really good in Trick Room, and then also gets really good coverage moves. I mean, like Superpower, fighting type moves in general hit a lot of stuff either super effectively or neutrally, which is nice. Poison Jab was obviously for the Tapus, and then Ice Punch was to cover for stuff like Garchomp and then Salamence. And then Protect obviously is like a really good move to always just have when you have the option to run it. So yeah, that's kind of how his Buzzwole worked. It functioned mostly in Trick Room, but you could enable it with the Salamence and Bulldoze. And then the last slot was Gastrodon. This was also another really interesting pick on Tomoyuki's team, but when you look at it more and more often, it actually is really smart. Because in this format, one of the really popular cores was Rain. Specifically, Pelipper and Golduck was actually used a lot, and I know a lot of you are sitting here like, oh my goodness, Golduck was used in the format, but it was actually pretty good. It won a regional with a guy named Preston Clark, who's actually one of my friends. He was running like Golduck with Waterium Z, and it just would like blow up everything, and even stuff like Tapu Koko that was like given general bulk would still just like die to Waterium Z like Hydro Pump from Golduck in the rain. So for the last slot, he added Gastrodon to kind of patch up the team, because if you just ignore the Gastrodon for a sec, the first 5 Pokemon against Rain is like not amazing. I understand Salamence resist water type moves, but it is 4 times weak to ice moves, which guess what, Golduck learns Ice Beam, so so that was a bit of a problem. So this was a really smart adaptation on this side, and keep in mind Ludicolo wasn't in this format, like it just didn't exist, so the options for Swift Swim users was Golduck, and then that was like pretty much it. I think like Poliwrath was used at one point as well, but yeah, so Gastrodon was just a really nice thing to kind of patch up that matchup, and you could even see it like in top 8 on this team. There's Politoed and Golduck. I don't think there's any more rain teams in top 8. No, but you also had like stuff like Araquanid in the format. You had stuff like Feeny. So this was just like a really, really good way to kind of patch up that water weakness to rain teams. But yeah, Tomyuki's team was just super well constructed. Like, I was really impressed when watching it at the World Championships, and I highly recommend, if you guys ever get the chance to just watch it, just go watch past footage of like Tomoyuki's games during this World Championships, and it was unbelievable to watch. It was a super well constructed team, and in my opinion, it's one of the best teams ever to have never win a World Championship. But it's not the only team that's, I would say, the best ever to never win, but we'll get into that probably in another episode. With that being said, hopefully this was like informative to you guys. Hope you all have a great day, and I will catch you all next time.